Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I had just moved to a new city. And like most young adults nowadays, I decided to give Tinder a shot. It was supposed to be a fun way to meet new people, maybe grab a drink or two, and who knows, maybe make some lasting connections. I downloaded the app, swiped a bit, and matched with a girl named Mia. Her profile was intriguing, mysterious, and a little dark, with just the right amount of edge that drew me in. She had this captivating smile and an air of confidence that made me curious. We exchanged messages, and there was an instant chemistry. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up. She suggested a secluded spot in the park, one that I had never heard of before. It sounded adventurous, and I liked the idea of having a more private setting away from the usual crowded cafes and bars. The day finally came, and I found myself wandering through the dimly lit paths of the park, my heart racing a little with excitement and nerves. The trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches casting eerie shadows on the ground. I felt like I had stepped into some kind of fairy tale, but not the kind with happy endings. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something unsettling. As I made my way deeper into the park, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I brushed it off as anxiety, but still, it gnawed at the back of my mind. Then I saw her. Mia was standing by a huge oak tree, her silhouette framed by the fading light. She looked even more captivating in person, her long hair cascading down her shoulders, a slight breeze playing with it. As I approached, she turned her head slightly, and for a moment, I felt this strange jolt of recognition. It was as if I had seen her somewhere before, but I couldn't place it. We exchanged small talk, but there was an underlying tension that made me uneasy. She spoke in a low, almost hypnotic tone, and her eyes seemed to bore into mine as if she was trying to read my thoughts. I tried to focus on what she was saying, but I couldn't help but notice how the shadows seemed to deepen around us. The once inviting park now felt like a labyrinth of secrets, and I was trapped in its maze. After a while, Mia suggested we take a walk. I hesitated but nodded, curious about where this would lead. We ventured down a narrow path that twisted and turned, the trees closing in around us. The sounds of the city faded away, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. As we walked, Mia began to share stories from her life, strange tales of dreams that felt real, encounters with people who vanished without a trace, and a fascination with the dark side of humanity. The way she spoke made my skin crawl. It felt as though she was weaving a spell around me, and I was too entranced to break free. Suddenly, she stopped. We stood in a small clearing, moonlight spilling through the branches above, illuminating her face in an ethereal glow. She turned to me, her expression shifting. There was something predatory in her gaze, a flicker of something that made my stomach twist. I felt a cold sweat on my brow as she leaned closer, whispering about her past, how she had always felt different, like she belonged to a world that was hidden from everyone else. That's when I noticed the shadows shifting around us. They seemed to pulse and breathe, dancing along the edges of the light. Panic surged in me. I wanted to leave, to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. Mia reached out and touched my arm, her fingers icy. I could see the faint outline of something in the trees behind her, a figure watching. My heart raced. I took a step back, trying to maintain my composure. I asked her if we could head back, but she just smiled, an unsettling smile that sent chills down my spine. "This is where it gets interesting," she said, her voice low and inviting. Before I could protest, she turned and beckoned me to follow her deeper into the woods. I hesitated, feeling the weight of an unseen presence pressing down on me. But curiosity, mixed with fear, propelled me forward. As we walked, a thick fog began to roll in, swirling around our feet like a living thing. The trees loomed taller and darker as if they were closing in, trapping us in this twisted realm. Mia continued to talk, her words becoming more frantic, more intense. She spoke of rituals and sacrifices, of a darkness that craved companionship. I could feel the air grow colder, and I instinctively wrapped my arms around myself. I wanted to ask her if she was okay, but I was afraid of what I might hear. Suddenly, she stopped again, this time in front of a large stone altar covered in moss. The moonlight illuminated it, revealing strange markings carved into its surface. My heart pounded in my chest. This was not a casual date. This was something far more sinister. I glanced around, my instinct screaming at me to run. Mia turned to me, her eyes wide, almost wild. "You have to understand," she said, her voice echoing in the stillness. "This is where I belong." The shadows behind her thickened, and I could see the figure more clearly now. A tall, dark silhouette with elongated limbs, watching us with an unsettling stillness. My breath quickened, and I took a step back, the instinct to flee overwhelming. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The stories, the strange energy, the feeling of being watched. It was all connected. I realized that Mia wasn't just a girl I had met on Tinder. She was part of something ancient and dark, and I had stumbled into it unwittingly. I turned to run, panic surging through my veins. But as I fled, I felt a cold hand grip my wrist, pulling me back. I looked into Mia's eyes, but they were no longer the same. The warmth and charm had vanished, replaced by something otherworldly and terrifying. As I struggled, the shadows around us began to swirl, and the figure stepped forward, revealing itself as a grotesque apparition. It was a thing of nightmares, with hollow eyes and a mouth that twisted into a grin. I was paralyzed by fear, trapped between the darkness and the girl I thought I knew. But then, something unexpected happened. Mia's grip on my wrist loosened, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of humanity in her eyes. "Run," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the chaos. I didn't need to be told twice. I tore away from her, sprinting through the darkened paths, branches clawing at my clothes as I raced back toward the entrance of the park. The shadows chased me, whispering secrets and promises of despair, but I pushed forward, fueled by adrenaline and the desperate need to escape. I burst into the safety of the streetlights, panting and disoriented. I looked back, and the park was just that, a park, peaceful and still. The shadows were gone, and the night felt ordinary again. But in my heart, I knew the truth. Mia was not just a girl. She was a conduit for something far more sinister. I never went back to that park, and I deleted Tinder the next day. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I can still feel the weight of those shadows pressing down on me, reminding me of the darkness that lurks in the most unexpected places. I swiped right on a profile that seemed too good to be true. His name was Jake, and the picture showed him in various adventures, hiking in the mountains, laughing with friends at the beach, and one particularly striking shot of him, standing in front of a breathtaking sunset. He had this easy smile that somehow disarmed me. The bio was charming and witty, sprinkled with just enough mystery to make me curious. Adventurer at heart, coffee addict, and a firm believer in the magic of the universe. I couldn't help but feel drawn to him. After a few days of texting, Jake suggested we meet up at a quaint little cafe tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. The kind of place where the air smelled like freshly baked pastries and the baristas had a way of remembering your name. I arrived early, nerves buzzing in my stomach like a swarm of butterflies. As I waited, I took in the surroundings, the soft chatter of people, the sunlight filtering through the windows, casting a warm glow on everything it touched. Then he walked in. Jake had that same charming smile, and I felt a rush of excitement mixed with a twinge of apprehension. We spent the next hour talking about our favorite books, our love for travel, and our dreams for the future. But as the conversation flowed, I noticed something unsettling in his gaze. It was intense, almost predatory, like he was analyzing every word I said. I brushed it off, chalking it up to his personality. As we left the cafe, he suggested going for a walk in a nearby park. I felt the familiar thrill of adventure and agreed. But as we walked deeper into the park, I couldn't shake the feeling that the atmosphere was shifting. The trees loomed taller, and the shadows cast by the fading sunlight stretched longer. The laughter of children playing seemed to fade into the background, replaced by an eerie silence. Jake continued to talk, but the words became meaningless as my mind wandered. I found myself glancing around, feeling the weight of the darkening sky pressing in. We reached a secluded area of the park, where the trees were thick and the path narrowed. Jake stopped and turned to me, his smile still intact, but something about it felt off. The intensity of his gaze sent a chill down my spine. I tried to shake off my unease, laughing at what I thought was an overactive imagination. But then, he began to share stories that felt increasingly bizarre. Tales of his childhood, of growing up in a town that seemed to have its own secrets. He spoke of strange occurrences, of whispers in the night, and shadows that moved on their own. I could see the passion in his eyes, but it felt more like obsession. Sometimes, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone, I think there are things in this world that we can't explain. Like, what if we are merely players in a game we don't even understand? I laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood, but as the shadows deepened around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe he believed what he was saying a little too much. The conversation took a darker turn as he spoke of people disappearing in the woods, of legends that warned against wandering too far from the path. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. I wanted to leave, but there was something magnetic about him that kept me rooted to the spot. Just then, a rustle in the bushes made me jump. Jake noticed my reaction and laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. Don't worry, it's probably just a raccoon or something. Nothing to be scared of. But his tone was too calm, too assured. We continued walking, but I felt the need to get back to the main path. I suggested we head back, but he insisted on exploring further. Before I knew it, we were deeper in the woods, the trees enclosing us like sentinels guarding something hidden. The air felt thick, and I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Jake seemed unfazed, his mood shifting from playful to intense. He began to speak in riddles, his voice low and almost hypnotic. You know, the forest holds secrets. It has a way of revealing the truth about people. Are you afraid of the truth? I felt a wave of panic wash over me. The playful banter we had shared was gone, replaced by an unsettling tension. I wanted to run, but I couldn't let my fear show. I laughed again, but it sounded forced, hollow. As we reached a small clearing, the darkness enveloped us, and the air became still. A chill swept through the trees, rustling the leaves like whispers. In that moment, I realized I didn't know anything about this man I had met online. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I felt a rush of relief. I pulled it out, hoping for a distraction, but there was no signal. Jake stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. You see, this is where the magic happens, he said, his eyes glinting in the dim light. The forest knows our truths, and it has a way of bringing them to the surface. I took a step back, my instinct screaming at me to get away. The charm that had initially captivated me now felt like a trap. I turned to leave, but he reached out, grabbing my wrist. I felt a surge of panic as I looked into his eyes, which now held a predatory gleam. In a sudden burst of adrenaline, I pulled away and took off running. The path was a blur beneath my feet, branches clawing at me as I darted through the trees. I could hear him calling after me, but I didn't look back. My heart pounded in my chest, fear propelling me forward. I finally broke free from the trees and burst onto the main path, gasping for breath. The cafe was just up ahead, and I sprinted toward it, desperate for safety. I pushed through the door and collapsed at a table, my heart racing. The barista glanced at me, concern in her eyes, but I couldn't find the words. My mind raced as I tried to piece together what had just happened. The warmth of the cafe felt like a refuge, but the shadows of the park still loomed large in my mind. As I sat there, shaking, I pulled out my phone to call a friend. But when I opened the app, my heart sank. The familiar interface had changed. Instead of my usual contacts, there were messages from Jake, but they were different. They were dark, filled with ominous phrases about the forest and the truths it revealed. I looked around, panic rising in my chest. The cafe felt suffocating, the laughter and chatter of customers suddenly distant. I could swear I saw Jake standing outside, watching me through the window, his smile now twisted. I stumbled out of the cafe, heart racing, but the street was empty. I turned back to the cafe, but it was gone. In its place was a dark, twisted version of the park, shadows creeping in every direction, taunting me. I realized then that the magic Jake spoke of wasn't about adventure or connection. It was about something darker, something that had ensnared me in a web of psychological terror. The thrill of the unknown had led me into a nightmare, and as I stood there, the realization washed over me. I was no longer just a player in a game. I was the prey, and he was the hunter. I'd always been a bit skeptical about online dating, but when my friend started raving about Tinder, I figured I'd give it a shot. I mean, how hard could it be to find someone interesting, right? After swiping right on a few profiles that caught my eye, I matched with a guy named Jake. He had this rugged charm about him, complete with a flannel shirt and a mischievous smile that seemed to promise adventure. Our conversation flowed easily, like we'd known each other forever. He talked about his love for the outdoors, hiking, and late-night bonfires under the stars, all while I imagined the scent of pine trees and the sound of crackling firewood. He suggested we meet up for a hike at this secluded trail outside of town. It sounded perfect, a chance to escape the mundane routine of life and dive into a little adventure. The day arrived, and I found myself driving out to the trailhead, feeling an odd mix of excitement and nerves bubbling in my stomach. The drive was scenic, winding through dense woods with sunlight filtering through the trees, casting playful shadows on the road. I parked my car, took a deep breath, and stepped out, the fresh air hitting me like a wave of relief. The world felt alive around me, but there was something else too, something lurking just beyond the edges of my awareness. I waited at the trailhead, scanning the horizon for Jake. As the minutes ticked by, I felt the forest close in around me. Its beauty was breathtaking, but also isolating. Just as I was about to pull out my phone to message him, I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel behind me. My heart raced as I turned, but it was only Jake. He was just as charming in person, his smile wide and welcoming. We started our hike, chatting about everything and nothing at all. The trail was narrow and winding, flanked by towering trees that seemed to whisper secrets to one another. I tried to push away the creeping sensation that we were being watched, but it clung to me like a shadow. As we climbed higher, the air grew cooler, and the sunlight dimmed, creating a surreal atmosphere that felt almost dreamlike. Jake pointed out various plants and wildlife, his enthusiasm infectious. But every now and then, he would glance over his shoulder, a flicker of something in his eyes that made me uneasy. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just my imagination running wild. After all, we were in nature, and nature has its own rhythms. As we reached a clearing, I was struck by the view. The valley below was breathtaking, a tapestry of greens and browns stretching as far as the eye could see. We took a moment to soak it all in, but I could sense Jake's restlessness. He started pacing back and forth, occasionally stopping to peer into the trees, as if searching for something. My heart began to race again, and I felt a knot forming in my stomach. I suggested we head back, feeling an urge to escape the growing tension that wrapped around us like a thick fog. Jake nodded, but his expression shifted. There was an intensity in his gaze now, something that sent a chill creeping down my spine. As we retraced our steps, the forest felt different, darker somehow, as if it had shifted while we were lost in the view. The trees loomed taller, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers. A sudden noise broke the silence, a snap of twigs echoing through the air. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Jake stopped too, his eyes darting around. I could feel the fear rising in my throat. I wanted to laugh it off, to say it was probably just a deer or some other harmless creature, but the way Jake was looking around made me doubt that. We continued down the path, but my sense of unease grew. I could feel Jake's gaze lingering on me more than it should have, a pressure that made me want to shrink away. Every time I glanced back, he seemed to be lost in thought, his expression shifting between fascination and something darker. I tried to shake the feeling off, convincing myself it was just nerves, but the forest felt alive, pulsing with an energy that made my skin crawl. Then we reached a fork in the trail. One path led back down toward the parking area, while the other wound deeper into the woods. Jake hesitated, glancing down the path that went further into the trees. "Let's explore a bit more," he said, but I could hear the underlying urgency in his voice. It was as if he was drawn to the darkness, as if something was calling to him from the depths of the woods. I protested, my instinct screaming at me to turn back, but something in his eyes held me captive. I felt like I was stepping into a trap, but I couldn't quite bring myself to voice my concerns. We took the left path, and with every step, the atmosphere grew heavier. The trees closed in around us, their branches intertwining like skeletal arms, blocking out the light. The deeper we went, the more the air felt charged, thick with an unsettling energy. It was as if the forest itself was aware of us, watching, waiting. I could hear the faint rustle of leaves, the distant sound of something moving just out of sight. I glanced at Jake, but his focus seemed distant, lost in the shadows. Suddenly, I heard a low growl. My heart stopped. I turned to Jake, ready to bolt back up the trail, but he stood frozen, his eyes wide. I followed his gaze and felt my blood run cold. From behind a tree, a figure emerged, its features obscured by the shadows. It was tall and gaunt, with eyes that gleamed like polished stones in the dim light. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed Jake's arm, urging him to run. But he didn't move. Instead, he smiled, that same charming smile, but it felt twisted now, like a mask slipping. "I've been waiting for this," he said, his voice low and melodic, sending chills through me. Before I could process his words, the figure lunged, and I felt Jake's grip on my arm tighten. I screamed, the sound echoing through the trees as I fought against him. A sudden realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a date gone wrong. I was part of something much darker than I could have ever imagined. The figure drew closer, revealing a face that was a grotesque mockery of humanity, and I felt like I was drowning in fear. I broke free from Jake's grasp and took off down the trail, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I could hear footsteps behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I sprinted blindly, branches whipping against my arms and legs, the forest becoming a blur around me. Finally, I burst out of the tree line and into the clearing where we had first stopped. My car was just ahead, a beacon of safety. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking as I glanced back toward the darkness. There was no sign of Jake or the figure. I jumped into my car, slamming the door shut, and locked it with a shaky breath. I sped away, the road twisting and turning as I made my way back into town, but the fear didn't leave me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted, watched from the shadows. It wasn't until I was safely home, heart still racing, that I allowed myself to breathe again. But even then, I couldn't escape the cold grip of dread. I opened my phone to block Jake, but as I swiped through the app, my heart dropped. There was a new message from him, a simple line that sent chills racing down my spine. "You shouldn't have run. They're always watching." It all started on a rainy Friday night when I was swiping through Tinder, half-heartedly looking for a distraction. The weather was gloomy, and I could hear the relentless patter of rain against my window while I sat curled up in my favorite blanket. I'd had a rough week, and the idea of meeting someone new was both thrilling and terrifying. My thumb glided over faces, each one more forgettable than the last, until I stumbled upon her profile. Her name was Clara, and she had this magnetic smile that lit up the dimness of my screen, the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. Her bio was simple yet intriguing. "Let's get lost together," it read, followed by a winking emoji. I felt a flicker of excitement. We matched almost instantly, and the conversation flowed easily. She talked about her love for the outdoors, the thrill of exploring abandoned places, and her fascination with urban legends. I was hooked. As the night wore on, we exchanged messages that felt effortless, each one pulling me deeper into her world. I learned that she lived a few neighborhoods away, and that she was as curious about me as I was about her. By the time we decided to meet, my heart raced with anticipation. We agreed to meet at a small cafe tucked away in an old part of town. It had this vintage charm, with creaky wooden floors and walls adorned with faded photographs. I arrived a bit early, the warm aroma of coffee mingling with the sweet scent of pastries, filling the air. I took a seat by the window, nervously glancing at my phone every few minutes, half hoping to see a message from Clara. When she finally walked in, it felt like time slowed down. She wore a dark green jacket that complemented her auburn hair, and her eyes sparkled with mischief. We chatted easily over coffee, sharing stories, laughter, and an undeniable chemistry that crackled between us. I felt like I had known her for ages. After a while, Clara suggested we go for a walk in a nearby park. It was late. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the park was lit only by the flickering lights of old lampposts. As we wandered along the winding paths, she shared her obsession with ghost stories and abandoned places. I was intrigued and a bit unsettled at the same time. There was something in her voice, a fervor that made my skin prickle. "Have you ever been to the old Fairview Asylum?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with excitement. I hadn't. The asylum had been closed for years, its reputation shadowed by tales of hauntings and mysterious disappearances. "We should go," she said, almost breathless with thrill. I hesitated, but the idea of exploring such a place with her felt exhilarating, even if it was a bit reckless. As we approached the asylum, the atmosphere shifted. The air turned heavy, charged with an eerie stillness. The building loomed ahead, an ancient structure with crumbling walls and shattered windows that seemed to watch us. Clara's enthusiasm never wavered, and I found myself drawn to her fearless spirit. We entered through a side door, which creaked ominously as we pushed it open. The inside was dark, lit only by the faint beams of our flashlights. The walls were lined with peeling paint, and the floorboards groaned under our weight. Clara led the way, her laughter echoing off the walls, but I felt a chill creeping up my spine. There was something unsettling about the place, a tangible heaviness that wrapped around us like a fog. We wandered through long, narrow hallways, past rooms filled with remnants of the past, rusted beds, broken furniture, and faded photographs of patients who had once called this place home. Clara's voice was a soundtrack to my growing unease, her excitement palpable as she recounted the legends associated with the asylum. I tried to shake off the feeling that we shouldn't be there, but her enthusiasm was contagious. Suddenly, we stumbled upon a stairwell leading down into darkness. "Let's check it out," Clara urged, her eyes gleaming with mischief. My stomach twisted, but I followed her down, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was even more decayed, filled with shadows and the faint remnants of old equipment. Clara shone her flashlight around, illuminating the dust and cobwebs that clung to the corners. As we moved deeper into the basement, I noticed something odd. Clara kept glancing over her shoulder, an expression of unease creeping into her features. I brushed it off as part of the thrill of being in such a spooky place. But then I heard it, a soft noise, like a faint whisper, echoing through the darkness. My heart raced as I turned to Clara, her face pale as she strained to listen. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, feeling a knot of fear tightening in my chest. The whispering grew louder, more distinct, and I could have sworn it was calling my name. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed Clara's arm, urging her to leave. We sprinted back up the stairs, my breath coming in short gasps as the shadows seemed to follow us. Just as we reached the exit, the whispers escalated into a cacophony, filling the air with an unsettling energy. We burst through the door and into the cool night air, gasping for breath, adrenaline coursing through our veins. Once outside, I turned to Clara, ready to share my fright, but she was staring at the ground, her face a mask of confusion. "What just happened?" she murmured, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. I felt the weight of her gaze, but it was as if she wasn't really seeing me. The atmosphere shifted again, and I was struck by a strange sense of dread. I backed away from her, my heart hammering. "Clara, are you okay?" I asked, but she didn't respond. Instead, she began to speak in a low, almost melodic tone, words I couldn't comprehend. It felt like reality was slipping away. I glanced around, the park now feeling sinister, the shadows creeping closer. I turned to run but stumbled, falling to the ground as Clara's voice echoed around me. "You think you know me, but you don't," she said, the words laced with an unsettling calmness. I scrambled to my feet, my instinct screaming for me to flee. As I looked back at her, I realized her expression had changed. The warmth in her eyes was gone, replaced by something dark and hollow. "You're just another story," she said, her smile now twisted. With terror coursing through me, I dashed away from the park, not daring to look back. The whispers faded behind me, but the chill remained, wrapping around me like a shroud. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment, slamming the door shut and locking it tight. As I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, I couldn't shake the feeling of Clara's gaze on me, the way she had transformed before my eyes. I pulled out my phone, desperate to erase the night, but when I opened Tinder, her profile was gone. She had vanished, as if she had never existed. It was then that I noticed a message from her, sent just moments before I had run away. "Thanks for being part of my story. You'll always be in my mind." The room felt colder, and I knew I would never look at dating apps the same way again. It was a typical Friday night, and I was scrolling through Tinder, swiping left and right, mostly left. I had swiped on a few cute profiles, but nothing really caught my eye. It felt like a game at that point, just mindlessly flicking my thumb across the screen, while the world outside my window was buzzing with life. My friends were out at a party somewhere, and I was stuck at home, nursing a pizza and scrolling through photos of strangers. Then I saw her. Her name was Lila, and her profile picture was a close-up of her face, with bright blue eyes and a captivating smile. The bio was simple but intriguing. "Let's create some memories." I swiped right, and a moment later we matched. I felt a thrill at the match, a little rush of excitement that maybe tonight wouldn't be as boring as I thought. We chatted for a while, nothing too deep, just the usual small talk. But there was something about her that felt different. Her replies were quick, almost as if she was waiting for me to message her. I found myself laughing at her jokes, and she told me how she loved horror movies and ghost stories. I was hooked. After a few exchanges, we decided to meet up. She suggested a small cafe on the outskirts of town, one I had never been to. When I arrived, the cafe had a cozy vibe, lit with dim lights and decorated with vintage posters. It was the kind of place that felt like it had stories hidden in every corner, but there was something slightly off about it too. The air felt thick, heavy, as if the walls were absorbing all the conversations and secrets whispered there over the years. I spotted Lila, sitting in the far corner, her blue eyes sparkling in the low light. She looked even more stunning in person. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. I learned that she lived alone in an old house just outside the city. It was her grandmother's place, and she had a knack for collecting odd antiques that gave her home a unique vibe. Each item had a story, she said, and she loved the idea of living in a place filled with history. At first, I found it charming, but as she spoke, I noticed a flicker of something darker in her expression, a shadow that crossed her face when she mentioned the antiques. As the night wore on, I felt a chill creeping up my spine. It was a combination of the cafe's eerie ambience and Lila's increasingly intense gaze. She would lean in closer when she spoke, her voice dropping to a whisper as if we were sharing secrets meant for only us. I could see her passion, but there was an edge to it, an underlying intensity that made my heart race. I couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to spend more time with her, to see her world. After a few hours, the cafe started to empty out. The barista began to clean up, and the soft jazz music faded into the background. Lila suggested we continue the night at her place, and against my better judgment, I agreed. The drive to her house was filled with an anxious excitement. The streets were dark and quiet, and the trees lining the road loomed like silent sentinels. When we arrived at her house, I felt a wave of unease wash over me. The place was massive, a Victorian-style structure with creaky floorboards and an air of neglect. The porch creaked under my feet, and I could hear the wind whistling through the eaves. Lila opened the door and gestured for me to enter. The inside was dimly lit, with shadows dancing across the walls, transforming the antique furniture into ghostly figures. She took my hand and led me to the living room, where an array of peculiar items were displayed. Old dolls with cracked porcelain faces, a vintage typewriter, and strange paintings that seemed to watch me as I moved. I felt compelled to ask about them, but every time I did, she would sidestep the question with a playful smile, her eyes gleaming with mischief. As we settled on the couch, she turned off the lights, and the room fell into darkness, save for the glow from a few candles she lit. The flickering flames cast eerie shadows, making the room feel even more haunted. We shared ghost stories, and with each tale, I could sense the tension building, the atmosphere thickening. Lila's laughter echoed in the dark, but there was a sharpness to it, like a knife slicing through the night. Then she leaned in closer, and I could feel her breath against my skin. She whispered about an antique mirror she had, one that supposedly belonged to a witch. It was said to reflect not just your image, but your soul. I laughed it off, but my heart raced. There was a wildness in her eyes, a fervor that made me question if she believed it herself. Suddenly, she stood up, her silhouette framed by the dim candlelight. She wandered away, saying she wanted to show me the mirror. My instinct screamed at me to leave, but curiosity got the better of me, and I followed her. She led me upstairs, the wooden steps creaking ominously beneath our weight. The hallway was lined with more antiques, each one more bizarre than the last. Finally, we reached a small room at the end of the hall. She opened the door, revealing a space cluttered with old furniture and boxes. In the center stood the mirror, covered with a dusty sheet. Lila approached it, her fingers dancing over the fabric before pulling it away dramatically. The mirror was ornate, its frame twisted and dark, like it had been plucked from the depths of a nightmare. As she stood before it, I felt a chill run down my spine. Lila's expression shifted, her eyes narrowing as she gazed into the glass. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest, but the reflection wasn't just of her. I saw shadows flickering behind her, dark shapes that seemed to writhe and pulse. The room felt colder, and I could hear whispers, barely audible but unmistakable, swirling around us. I tried to back away, but Lila reached out, grasping my wrist with a grip that felt unnaturally strong. Her voice dropped to a chilling whisper, saying the mirror had a history, that it could reveal truths hidden deep within. I wanted to break free, to escape the suffocating atmosphere, but I was frozen in place, captivated and terrified. Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, and I saw them clearly in the reflection. Faces twisted in anguish, their expressions frozen in horror. I stumbled back, panic rising in my throat. Lila, however, seemed entranced. Her eyes glazed over as she murmured something incoherent. It was as if she was in a trance, lost to the malevolence that emanated from the mirror. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I yanked my wrist free and turned to flee. But as I dashed for the door, I felt a force pull me back, a darkness wrapping around me like a vice. I turned back, and Lila was no longer standing by the mirror. Instead, her reflection remained, staring at me with a sinister smile. I bolted down the hallway, heart racing, the whispers growing louder, clawing at my mind. I could feel the air thickening around me, a suffocating weight pressing down as I slammed the door behind me. I raced down the stairs, nearly tripping on the steps, adrenaline fueling my escape. As I burst through the front door, the cool night air hit me like a wave, and I ran to my car, not daring to look back. I drove away, the headlights cutting through the darkness as I left that haunted house behind. It wasn't until I got home that I realized I had forgotten my phone. I had a missed call from Lila. I didn't dare listen to the voicemail. Instead, I deleted the app, vowing never to swipe again. The chilling realization settled in my gut. Sometimes, the monsters lurking in the shadows are not always what they seem. I stumbled upon a profile that caught my eye. Jake. His pictures were dark and moody, like he'd just stepped out of a film noir. He had a chiseled jaw, deep-set eyes that seemed to hold shadows, and a smirk that suggested he knew things you didn't. His bio was short and cryptic. "Let's make tonight unforgettable." I felt a shiver of excitement, and maybe a little fear, as I swiped right. Within minutes, my phone buzzed. A match. I hesitated, staring at the screen as adrenaline coursed through me. What if he was just some weirdo? But the thrill of meeting someone intriguing pulled me in. We chatted for a while, and he was charming in a way that made my heart race. He suggested we meet at an old, dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town, a place known for its eerie ambience and ghost stories. I felt a rush of nerves mixed with thrill. I knew it was a bit risky, but I said yes anyway. When I arrived, the bar was even creepier than I imagined. The wooden door creaked as I pushed it open, and the musty air engulfed me. Flickering candles cast dancing shadows on the walls, and an old jukebox played a haunting melody in the corner. I scanned the room, half expecting to see Jake standing there, but he wasn't in sight. I grabbed a seat at the bar, my heart thumping as I waited. Minutes felt like hours as I watched the door, glancing at my phone every now and then. Just when I was about to lose hope, he walked in. He was dressed in a dark leather jacket, his hair tousled just right. He had that magnetic charm that drew everyone's eyes, but there was something unsettling in the way he moved. He approached me with a confident stride, and for a moment, I forgot all my reservations. As we talked, he was captivating, weaving tales of paranormal encounters and the history of the bar. The more he spoke, the more I felt a pull toward him, but there was an undercurrent of unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was probing me, testing my reactions. It was like a game, and I was the unwitting player. Jake leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, and I felt the hairs on my neck stand on end. He mentioned a local legend about a woman who disappeared in these very woods, just behind the bar. They said her spirit still wandered, searching for something or someone. My heart raced as his eyes glinted with something dark. I laughed it off, trying to lighten the mood, but I could tell he wasn't joking. The hours slipped away, and the bar began to empty. We were the last ones left, the bartender cleaning up in the background, casting suspicious glances our way. I felt a strange mix of attraction and dread. I excused myself to the restroom, hoping to clear my head. As I walked down the narrow hallway, the flickering lights made the walls seem to close in around me. When I returned, Jake was gone. Panic surged through me as I scanned the bar. The bartender shrugged, saying he hadn't seen anyone leave. I felt trapped, like I was in a twisted game with no rules. I tried to play it cool, but my heart raced as paranoia set in. I decided to leave, hoping to shake off the uneasy feeling. As I stepped outside, the rain had intensified, and the streets were slick with water. I walked quickly to my car, glancing over my shoulder. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I had the distinct feeling someone was watching me. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the atmosphere of the night. I got into my car, locking the doors, and took a deep breath. Just as I was about to drive away, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Jake. "Don't leave yet. I'm closer than you think." My heart sank. I felt a chill wash over me as I looked around. I was alone, but the sense of being hunted crept in. I started the car and drove away, trying to shake the unease. As I drove through the winding roads leading out of town, I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Jake's dark figure following me. The trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. I turned the music up, trying to drown out the noise of my thoughts, but the rhythm only heightened my anxiety. Just as I was about to feel a little more at ease, my phone buzzed again. Another message. "You shouldn't have left." Panic surged through me as I pulled over, my heart racing. I tried to think clearly. Was this a joke? My mind raced through all the possible scenarios, but there was no answer that calmed my nerves. I took a deep breath and decided to call a friend, but my phone was dead. I cursed under my breath and glanced around. The road was deserted, the trees standing like silent sentinels. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corner of my eye. I turned to look, but there was nothing there, just the relentless sound of raindrops hitting the roof of my car. I could feel my body tense, the adrenaline pumping through my veins. I had to get out of there. I turned the key in the ignition, but nothing happened. The engine sputtered and died. Panic clawed at my throat. I fumbled in my bag for my charger, desperate for any sign of life, but it was useless. My only connection to the outside world was gone. Then I heard it, a soft tapping on my window. My heart dropped. I turned slowly, and there he was, Jake, standing in the rain, his face partially obscured by shadows. He looked almost ethereal, the rain cascading down his face, but his eyes were wild, and his lips curled into that unsettling smirk. I felt frozen, trapped in my own car. He leaned closer, pressing his face against the glass, and for a moment, I could see something behind his eyes, a glimmer of madness. I felt the urge to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. He tapped again, and I could see the reflection of his eyes in the glass, piercing through the darkness. I wanted to flee, but my body wouldn't move. Then, in an instant, he stepped back, and I felt a rush of confusion. What was he doing? Why wasn't he trying to get in? In that moment of hesitation, I caught sight of something behind him, something moving in the shadows of the trees. A figure, pale and ghostly, drifted toward the car. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it was the woman from the legend, her eyes hollow and searching. Jake turned and looked at her, and a triumphant smile spread across his face. I finally found the strength to start the car again, and this time it roared to life. I slammed the gear into drive and sped away, the image of Jake and the ghost fading into the rearview mirror. As I drove, my heart pounded, but I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. What had just happened? I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my apartment, but even then, I felt the weight of the night pressing down on me. I could still hear the echo of Jake's laughter in my mind, that twisted, unsettling sound. I opened my phone, desperate to delete his number, but my heart dropped when I saw a final message from him. "You'll always be part of my story." I tossed my phone onto the couch and sank into the shadows of my room. I tried to shake off the night's events, but sleep wouldn't come. All I could think about was the look in Jake's eyes and the ghostly figure behind him, and I realized I was tangled in a web far darker than I had ever imagined. The moment I swiped right, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had been scrolling through Tinder for weeks, swiping left on countless profiles, but something about her caught my eye. Her name was Lily, and her pictures were stunning, bright, infectious smile, long dark hair that danced in the wind. The kind of girl who could light up a room, or so it seemed. We matched instantly, and my heart raced as I waited for her to message me. When her text finally came through, it was casual, friendly. She suggested we meet up at a cozy little cafe on the edge of town, one I'd never been to before. I was excited, but the butterflies in my stomach were getting a bit out of control. I had been on dates before, but something about this one felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the air felt thicker, charged with something I couldn't quite identify. The cafe was tucked away in a dimly lit alley, the kind of place that seemed to thrive on secrecy. As I stepped inside, the scent of coffee mixed with freshly baked pastries enveloped me. The walls were painted a deep shade of burgundy, adorned with old photographs that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. It felt like stepping into another time, a place where whispers and secrets lingered. I spotted her immediately. Lily was sitting at a small wooden table in the corner, her back to the wall. She looked stunning in a black dress that clung to her curves in all the right places. As I approached her, I noticed how her eyes flicked to the door every time it opened. It was subtle, but there was a tension in her posture I couldn't ignore. We talked about everything, our favorite movies, awkward childhood stories, and our shared interest in horror novels. She was engaging and funny, but as the conversation flowed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Occasionally, she would glance around the room, her smile faltering for just a moment. It was almost as if she was checking for someone. As the night wore on, the cafe emptied out, leaving us alone in the dim light. The barista had cleared the tables, and the only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. I leaned in closer, trying to catch her eye, but she seemed lost in thought, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Then she suddenly asked me if I believed in the supernatural. I laughed it off, giving her a playful shrug, but she didn't return the laughter. Instead, she leaned in, her voice low and serious. She told me about her fascination with urban legends, particularly one about a man who would lure unsuspecting victims to their doom. I felt a chill creep up my spine as she recounted the details, the way he would appear charming and charismatic, only to reveal his true nature when it was too late. I was intrigued, but the atmosphere shifted. The warmth of the cafe felt distant, and I started to feel a knot in my stomach. As she spoke, I noticed her eyes glancing at the door again, and I followed her gaze. It was just a couple of late-night stragglers, but they looked strangely out of place in the dim cafe, their faces obscured by shadows. Lily continued her story, and I found myself hanging on her every word, even though my instincts told me to be cautious. She smiled, but there was something unsettling about it. It didn't reach her eyes, which were clouded with a mixture of excitement and fear. I couldn't help but feel like I was being pulled into a narrative that I didn't want to be a part of. Just then, the door swung open, and a gust of cold wind swept through the cafe, making me shiver. I turned to look, and my heart sank. A tall figure stepped inside, his face hidden beneath the hood of a dark jacket. He scanned the room, his gaze lingering on us before he took a step forward, his movements slow and deliberate. Lily's demeanor changed in an instant. She stiffened, her eyes wide as she backed away from the table, her chair scraping against the floor. I felt a surge of panic rush through me. My mind raced. Was this the man from her story? Was he here for her? As he moved closer, I caught a glimpse of his face. It was gaunt, almost skeletal, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through me. I felt paralyzed, unable to move as he approached. It was as if time had slowed, and all I could do was watch. Lily stood up, her hands trembling as she looked between me and the man. Then, without warning, she bolted for the back door, leaving me in shock. I wanted to follow her, to understand what was happening, but the man blocked my path. "Stay where you are," he said, his voice smooth and chilling. "You don't want to get involved in this." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I didn't want to be here, didn't want to be caught in whatever twisted game was unfolding. The man stepped closer, and I could smell something foul on him, like rotting leaves. Just then, the barista, who had been watching the scene unfold from behind the counter, finally spoke. "Leave her alone, Jason. She's not part of your game." The tension in the air shifted again as the man, Jason, turned his attention toward the barista, anger flashing across his face. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped, but there was a tremor in his voice that suggested otherwise. I took a step back, feeling the gravity of the situation sink in. This wasn't just a bad date. I was caught in the middle of something dark and twisted, something that was spiraling out of control. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the fragments of the night. Lily's nervousness, the way she had told her story, the haunted look in her eyes. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a door slamming open. Lily emerged from the back, her face pale but determined. "I'm done playing games, Jason," she said, her voice steady. "You can't keep doing this." I felt a jolt of confusion. The fear that had been consuming me shifted to shock. Lily wasn't just a terrified victim. She was confronting him. The atmosphere in the cafe crackled with energy, a surreal dance of power dynamics unfolding before me. Jason's expression morphed from anger to realization, and in that moment, I understood the truth. This wasn't about me or some random date gone wrong. It was about a twisted relationship and a woman reclaiming her narrative. As I stood there frozen, I realized that the man I thought was dangerous was, in fact, a shadow of Lily's past, a ghost she was finally exorcising. In a swift movement, she stepped forward, her confidence palpable. "You don't own me anymore," she said, her voice resonating with strength. The cafe felt like it was vibrating with a mixture of fear and empowerment. I watched as Jason's bravado crumbled, and he turned on his heel, disappearing into the night. Lily's shoulders relaxed, and she turned to me, her smile returning, though now it was different, genuine. The tension that had wrapped around us like a noose began to fade. She walked back to the table, and for a moment, we both just stood there, catching our breath. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had witnessed something profound, something that went far beyond a simple date. As we sat down together, the world outside seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us in the soft glow of the cafe. Her hand brushed against mine, and in that moment, I felt a strange connection, one that went beyond words, beyond fear. We talked for a while longer, the atmosphere shifting from suspense to a strange sense of camaraderie. I realized that this night wasn't just an encounter. It was a turning point for both of us. Maybe, just maybe, we were both escaping something, finding solace in the most unexpected of places. As we left the cafe, the night air felt different, lighter. I walked beside her, feeling a sense of hope, knowing that whatever had happened in that dimly lit cafe, we had both emerged stronger. The unexpected twist of the night had turned into a story neither of us would forget. One night, feeling adventurous, I swiped through Tinder, my thumb gliding across faces and bios like I was sifting through a box of chocolates. Most of them were the usual suspects, guys with gym selfies, cliches about hiking, and desperate attempts at humor. But then I stumbled upon his profile. He had dark hair, a chiseled jaw, and an intense gaze that felt like he was staring straight into my soul. His bio was simple but intriguing. "Let's get lost together." I hesitated for a moment, but something about him drew me in. Maybe it was his smile or the mystery behind those deep-set eyes. We matched, and the conversation flowed surprisingly well. He was charming, witty, and had a passion for the same obscure bands I liked. Things escalated quickly, and before I knew it, we were planning to meet up at a local coffee shop. The day of our date was rainy, a steady drizzle that cast a gloomy haze over the city. I wasn't sure if it was the weather or my nerves that made everything feel heavier, but I shook it off. I chose a cozy spot at the back of the cafe, where I could watch the rain trickle down the window while I waited. When he walked in, he was even more striking in person, his presence filling the space. We talked for hours, the world outside fading away as we shared stories and laughed over steaming cups of coffee. But as the sun began to set, the atmosphere shifted. He became more intense, his questions probing deeper into my life. It was as if he was dissecting my thoughts, trying to uncover my secrets. At first, I was flattered. Who wouldn't be intrigued by someone so interested? But as he leaned in closer, I felt this inexplicable sense of unease creeping in. He suggested we go for a walk. I hesitated, glancing at the rain-soaked streets outside. But the allure of adventure tempted me, and I found myself agreeing. We walked through the damp streets, the sound of our footsteps echoing off the old buildings. The world around us felt different, as if the city had transformed into a labyrinth, each corner promising something unknown. The rain had subsided, leaving a fresh scent in the air. We wandered aimlessly, talking about everything and nothing at all. But the more we walked, the more I noticed his eyes darting around, scanning our surroundings as if he was searching for something or someone. I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself it was just my imagination running wild. But then he stopped, suddenly serious. He pointed to an old, abandoned building looming in the distance, its windows shattered and walls covered in graffiti. "Let's check that out," he said, his voice low and inviting. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I glanced around, feeling the weight of the city pressing down on me. I wanted to say no, to turn back and find the safety of the crowded streets. But curiosity gnawed at me, and before I knew it, we were walking toward the building. Inside, the air was stale, the darkness swallowing us whole. I could barely see anything, relying on the faint light filtering through the broken windows. The floor creaked beneath our weight, and the sound echoed like a warning. I felt a chill, a sense of foreboding crawling up my spine. As we moved deeper into the building, I noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols I couldn't decipher. My heart began to race, a primal instinct telling me to leave. But he seemed captivated, running his fingers along the walls, his face lit with an unnerving excitement. "Isn't this amazing?" he exclaimed, his voice echoing in the emptiness. I forced a smile, trying to match his enthusiasm, but fear gnawed at my insides, and I took a step back, wanting to retreat from the ominous shadows that surrounded us. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the floor above us. My heart dropped, the sound reverberating in the silence. I turned to him, my eyes wide with panic. "What was that?" I whispered, but he merely shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. "Probably just the building settling," he said, but his eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. I wanted to believe him, but the dread in my gut told me otherwise. We continued to explore, but I felt increasingly uneasy. The atmosphere felt charged, as if something was watching us. It was a sensation I couldn't shake, the hairs on my arms standing on end. I could see the excitement in his eyes as he led me further into the darkness, but all I could think about was escaping. I suggested we head back, my voice barely above a whisper. But he insisted we keep going. "Just a little further," he said, his tone almost persuasive, and I found myself swept along against my better judgment. Finally, we reached a room at the end of a long hallway, the door hanging at an awkward angle. My heart raced as we stepped inside. The room was barren except for a single, flickering light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The walls were covered in more strange symbols, but now they seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I felt a surge of panic. Something was very wrong. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my wrist, his grip firm and unyielding. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. I felt trapped, and the walls seemed to close in around me. My mind raced with thoughts of escape, of running back into the streets where I could breathe again. But he leaned closer, and I could see the wildness in his eyes. "You don't understand. We're meant to be here," he said, almost reverently. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled against his grip. I was terrified, and all the signs I had ignored came rushing back. The way he had scrutinized me, the strange excitement he had shown in the abandoned building. It all made sense now. In that moment, I realized he wasn't just looking for adventure. He was drawn to something darker, something that pulsed beneath the surface of the city. As I wrestled free, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I bolted for the door, my heart racing as I burst back into the hallway. The darkness swallowed me, and I sprinted down the stairs, hearing him call after me, his voice a haunting echo. I burst out into the night, the cool air hitting my face like a shock. I didn't look back as I ran, my feet pounding against the pavement, the world blurring around me. I finally made it to the streetlights, the familiar buzz of life surrounding me. I collapsed against a lamppost, gasping for breath. But even as I stood there, heart racing, I felt a strange sensation wash over me. The next morning, I woke to find my phone buzzing with notifications. I opened Tinder, and there he was, his profile still active. But something was off. His bio had changed. Instead of "let's get lost together," it now read, "I'll find you again." Chills ran down my spine. I thought I had escaped, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The city felt different as I walked through it. Shadows lurking behind every corner, an invisible weight pressing down on me. I was trapped in a game I didn't understand, caught in a web spun from my own curiosity. The thrill of adventure had turned into a nightmare, and I realized that sometimes the darkness isn't something you can simply run from. It follows you, lurking just beyond the light, waiting for the right moment to strike. What was meant to be a fresh start had become a chilling reminder that some connections are better left untouched. I remember the moment I swiped right. It felt like any other day, scrolling through profiles, laughing at corny bios, and rolling my eyes at the endless parade of gym selfies. Then, there he was, Jake, with that charming smile and the kind of eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischief. We matched, and just like that, my phone buzzed with a notification that changed everything. We started chatting, and I was drawn in by his playful banter. He had this effortless way of making every conversation light, yet intriguing, like a magician with words. We talked late into the night, sharing our favorite movies, the best pizza places in town, and our dreams of traveling the world. It was easy, too easy, and I couldn't shake this strange feeling in the pit of my stomach that something was off. But who was I to question it? I was young, single, and ready to mingle. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet up. He suggested a little cafe on the edge of town, the kind with mismatched furniture and cozy nooks. I arrived a little early, my stomach fluttering with nerves. I walked in, the smell of fresh coffee wrapping around me like a warm blanket. The place was quiet, with only a couple of other patrons scattered around. I settled into a corner, scanning the room, trying to spot him. Minutes passed, and my excitement turned into impatience. Why was he late? I pulled out my phone, checking for any messages, but there was nothing. My heart sank a little. Just as I was about to text him, I spotted a figure at the door. It was him. He looked just like his photos, but there was something about his presence that sent a chill down my spine. Maybe it was the way he scanned the room, not just looking for me, but observing everyone, like he was sizing up a scene in some twisted play. When he finally approached me, A smile spread across his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. We exchanged pleasantries, and he sat down, leaning in a bit too close. The conversation flowed, but the more we talked, the more I felt like I was being pulled into this strange web he was weaving. He spoke about his life, but there was an odd intensity to his words, as if he was trying to pull me into his world, a world that felt darker than it should. As the sun began to set, shadows crept into the cafe, and the atmosphere shifted. I found myself glancing at the door, feeling the urge to leave. But he was charming, and part of me wanted to believe that I was just being paranoid. I took a sip of my coffee, and as I did, I noticed his eyes flicker to my hands, a predatory glint momentarily flashing across his face. I shook it off, attributing it to the dim lighting playing tricks on my mind. After a while, he suggested we take a walk. The evening air was crisp, and I thought a change of scenery might ease my unease. We strolled through the nearby park, the moonlight casting eerie shadows on the ground. The conversation turned darker as he began to share stories about his family, but they felt more like confessions. He talked about his father's temper and how he had grown up in a household filled with secrets. Each word dripped with a sense of foreboding, and I couldn't help but feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, peering into an abyss. I tried to steer the conversation back to lighter topics, but he seemed fixated on his past. His eyes darkened as he spoke, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I glanced around, noticing how isolated we were in the park, the nearest streetlight flickering ominously. It was then that I heard a rustle in the bushes, and my heart raced. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just an animal. Jake must have sensed my discomfort because he suddenly reached for my hand, his grip firm and unyielding. I jerked away instinctively, but he didn't let go. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I tried to smile, hoping to diffuse the tension. But the atmosphere had shifted. The night felt heavy, and I was acutely aware of how alone we were. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my best friend, asking if I was okay. I glanced at Jake, who seemed to be studying me with a mix of curiosity and something darker. I excused myself to reply, my fingers shaking slightly as I typed. I told her I was fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't. When I looked up, Jake had taken a step back, his expression unreadable. "You're not like the others," he said suddenly, and I didn't know how to respond. I felt a chill run down my spine as I tried to decipher what he meant. He stepped closer again, invading my personal space, and I could feel the weight of his gaze pinning me down. I decided it was time to end the evening. I made an excuse about having an early morning and started walking towards the park exit. He followed, his footsteps echoing too closely behind me. I picked up my pace, the shadows growing longer in the dim light. I felt like a rabbit being hunted, and the primal instinct to run kicked in. As I reached the exit, I turned to face him, my heart racing. "I think I should go now," I said, trying to sound firm. He chuckled softly, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "You're not scared of me, are you?" "I promise I'm not that bad." I forced a smile, but the air felt electric with tension. I stepped back, ready to bolt, but he moved closer, his eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't run away. You might miss something incredible." That was when I saw it, the glint of something metallic in his hand. My breath caught in my throat as panic surged through me. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the pavement, the sound of his footsteps echoing behind me. My heart raced as I sprinted toward my car, the parking lot looming ahead like a beacon of safety. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking as I finally got the door open. I jumped inside and locked it, my breath coming in short gasps. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him lurking in the shadows, but he was gone. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As I drove away, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Jake. "You'll regret running away. I know where you live." My heart dropped as I realized that the charming smile and playful banter had masked something sinister all along. I quickly pulled over to a gas station, my mind racing with fear and confusion. I glanced around, half expecting to see him lurking in the shadows. But all I saw were ordinary strangers, blissfully unaware of the horror I had just escaped. As I sat there, trying to process what had just happened, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. I had swiped right on a monster, and he wasn't done with me yet. The next day, I decided to take precautions. I changed my locks, alerted my friends, and kept my phone close, ready to call for help at a moment's notice. But despite my efforts, I still felt his presence looming over me, a dark cloud that wouldn't dissipate. A week passed, and I thought I had managed to put it behind me. I avoided the park and canceled my Tinder account. But then, I received another text. It was a photo of me, taken from across the street, standing outside my apartment. The message read, "I'm always watching." I felt my heart race as the reality of my situation sank in. The monster was closer than I thought, and this nightmare was just beginning. I always thought of myself as pretty savvy when it came to dating apps. I mean, how hard could it be to find someone decent in a sea of faces? Just swipe right if they look good. Swipe left if they don't. Easy, right? So when I matched with a girl named Claire, I felt a rush of excitement. Her profile was enticing. She had this way of capturing moments, like she was always in the right place at the right time. We chatted for a few days, sharing our favorite music and binge-worthy shows. I felt that spark you read about, the kind that makes your heart race and your palms sweat a little. After some back and forth, we decided to meet up. She suggested a small cafe tucked away in an old part of town, away from the usual crowd. It sounded perfect. I arrived early, the sun casting long shadows as I waited outside. The cafe had an old-world charm, with ivy creeping up the brick walls and soft music wafting through the air. It felt cozy, almost intimate, and I was looking forward to what the evening might hold. When she walked in, I was taken aback. Claire was even more beautiful in person, her hair cascading in waves and her smile lighting up the room. We settled into a corner booth, the soft glow of the hanging lights creating a warm atmosphere. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. We laughed and shared stories, the kind of deep conversations that felt like they could last forever. But then, as the night wore on, I noticed something off. It was subtle, a shift in her demeanor. She would glance over her shoulder occasionally, as if expecting someone or something. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe she was just anxious about meeting a stranger. But the way her smile faltered, just for a moment, sent a chill down my spine. As we finished our drinks, she suggested taking a walk through the nearby park. It sounded like a great idea, so we stepped out into the cool night air. The street lamps flickered above us, casting eerie shadows that danced along the pavement. The park was empty, and the trees loomed tall and foreboding, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The atmosphere shifted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Claire seemed on edge now, her laughter fading as we wandered deeper into the park. I asked if she was all right, but she just nodded, staring ahead. Then I saw it, a figure lurking just beyond the tree line. My heart raced as I squinted into the darkness. It was hard to make out any details, but I could feel the weight of someone watching us. I tried to dismiss it, thinking it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. We continued walking, but I felt a growing tension between us. Claire kept looking back, her steps quickening. I tried to keep the conversation flowing, but the words felt heavy on my tongue. Every now and then, I would catch a glimpse of that figure, always just out of sight, but never too far away. The more we walked, the more I felt a sense of dread creeping in. It was as if the night had taken on a life of its own, wrapping us in a cocoon of darkness. My mind raced with questions. Who was that person? Had Claire noticed them too? Was she in some kind of trouble? Finally, we reached a small clearing bathed in moonlight. I breathed a sigh of relief, hoping the openness would ease the tension. But Claire's expression was anything but relaxed. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. I felt a pang of concern. I wanted to comfort her, but something in her expression made me hesitate. Just then, I heard a rustling from the bushes behind us. I turned, my heart pounding. The figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the moonlight. It was a man, tall and gaunt, his features obscured by a hood. I felt my stomach drop. There was something about the way he moved, an unsettling grace that made my skin crawl. Claire grabbed my arm, her grip like a vice. I could feel her shaking. The man didn't say a word. He just stood there, watching us with an intensity that felt suffocating. I wanted to run, to get us out of there, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. And then, as if on cue, the man lifted his hand and pointed directly at Claire. The air was thick with tension, and I felt a wave of confusion wash over me. What did he want? Why was he targeting her? In that moment, I realized I didn't know anything about Claire beyond what she had shared online. I felt a pit in my stomach, an unsettling realization that I might have walked right into something I couldn't comprehend. Just as I was about to pull Claire away, she stepped forward, breaking free from my grasp. I shouted for her to stop, but it was too late. She approached the man with an eerie calmness, her eyes locked onto his. It was as if she was under a spell, drawn toward him. I felt paralyzed as I watched the two of them, my mind racing, desperately searching for an explanation. Then something happened. The man lifted his hood, revealing a face I recognized. It was someone I had seen in her photos, but it was different now, distorted, as if the darkness had consumed him. Claire's expression changed, shifting from fear to something else, something I couldn't quite place. Before I could process what was happening, she turned to me, her smile returning, but it was twisted, almost unnatural. "You shouldn't have come for me," she said, her voice eerily calm. My heart raced as I stepped back, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. The man was not just a stranger. He was her past, something she had been running from. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, the world around me blurring. Claire had lured me into this trap, and now I was ensnared in a web of her secrets. The last thing I remember before everything went black was her laughter, echoing in the night, a haunting melody that would replay in my mind long after the darkness took me. Somewhere deep within me, I knew I had been just another match in her game, one that had ignited a fire I couldn't escape. It started on a rainy Friday night. I had just come back from a long week of work, and the thought of spending the weekend alone didn't sit well with me. So, I opened Tinder, swiping through faces that blurred together, each one a fleeting moment in the dim glow of my phone. That's when I stumbled upon her, Emily. Her profile was simple but captivating. A quirky smile, a passion for horror films, and a special mention about loving late-night ghost tours. There was something about her that felt oddly magnetic. After a few swipes and some small talk, we decided to meet. She suggested a cozy little cafe tucked away in a quieter part of town, one I had never heard of before. The idea intrigued me, and I found myself looking forward to it, excited to meet someone who shared my interest in the macabre. As the night approached, I felt that familiar rush of anticipation mixed with unease. I arrived at the cafe, its exterior adorned with flickering fairy lights that struggled against the downpour. The air was thick with the smell of coffee and pastries, but there was something else, a lingering scent I couldn't place. I brushed it off as my imagination, eager to meet Emily. When I walked in, the warm light wrapped around me, and I spotted her in the corner, a small table, sitting alone with a book in her hands. She looked up as I approached, and her face lit up with a smile that sent a strange thrill down my spine. We exchanged pleasantries, and the conversation flowed easily, moving from favorite horror movies to ghost stories. As the clock ticked by, the cafe began to empty out, leaving just a few stragglers and us. I noticed Emily seemed to have a peculiar sense of humor, weaving dark jokes into our chat that made me laugh, albeit uneasily. The rain intensified outside, and the lights flickered for a moment as the power struggled against the storm. I felt a chill run through me, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just the cold air. As we talked, I noticed that her eyes seemed to dart to the door every time someone walked in. It was subtle, but it added a layer of tension that made me uneasy. I asked her if she was okay, and she laughed it off, saying she was just waiting for a friend who was running late. The clock struck 10, and I knew I should be heading home, but a part of me was drawn in by her energy. She suggested we take a walk since the rain had lessened to a drizzle, and I agreed. We strolled down the dimly lit streets, the only sound being the soft patter of raindrops against the pavement. The atmosphere shifted as we wandered further away from the cafe. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting long shadows that danced around us. As we approached an old, abandoned building, Emily paused, her gaze fixed on the structure. It looked like something out of a horror movie, with broken windows and peeling paint. She turned to me, her expression serious, and said that it was rumored to be haunted. My heart raced. I had always loved ghost stories, but standing in front of that building, the thrill morphed into something unsettling. Against my better judgment, I followed her as she stepped closer, her curiosity pulling me in. The door creaked open with a gentle push, and we found ourselves inside a dark hallway, the only light coming from her phone's flashlight. Dust motes floated in the beam, and the air felt thick, almost suffocating. We moved cautiously, with every step echoing in the empty space. The walls were lined with old photographs, their faces blurred and unrecognizable, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Emily led the way deeper into the building, her excitement palpable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we should turn back. I was starting to feel trapped, like the walls were closing in on us. Just as I was about to suggest we leave, she stopped in front of a large, cracked mirror hanging on the wall. She leaned in closer, her breath fogging up the glass, and then suddenly, she pulled back, her face pale. I turned to see what had startled her, but the hallway behind us was empty. I felt a rush of dread. I grabbed her arm, wanting to get out of there, but she hesitated, staring into the mirror as if something was calling to her. I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled her away, insisting we leave. That's when the lights flickered, and a loud bang echoed through the building, making my heart race. The sound reverberated through the walls, and I felt a cold wave wash over me. We stumbled back toward the entrance, but the door wouldn't budge. Panic set in as I pushed against it, my mind racing with thoughts of being trapped. Emily seemed unfazed, her expression oddly calm as she stood by the mirror, almost entranced. I turned to her, confusion and fear mingling in my chest as I shouted for her to help me. But she just smiled, a strange, unsettling smile that didn't reach her eyes. The atmosphere thickened, and I felt an overwhelming sense of despair. I backed away, my heart pounding as I realized this wasn't the girl I had met at the cafe. The Emily I knew was gone, replaced by someone else entirely. Just as I was about to scream, the door swung open, revealing a dark figure standing in the rain. I squinted, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, but my heart sank as I recognized the silhouette. It was me. My own reflection stood there, drenched and staring back at me with a knowing smile. I glanced back at Emily, but she was still fixated on the mirror, as if drawn into another reality. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I realized that I was trapped, not just in the building, but in a twisted game of perception. The moment stretched on, and time seemed to lose meaning. I could hear whispers echoing around me, intertwining with the sound of the rain outside. I turned back to the door, desperate to escape, but as I pushed against it again, it transformed, melting into a wall of glass that reflected both Emily and me. In an instant, the truth hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just a date gone wrong. It was a reflection of my own fears, my loneliness manifesting in a terrifying way. Emily was a specter of my imagination, a creation of my mind born from the darkness I had avoided. I was the one who had conjured this nightmare, and now I had to face it. As the whispers grew louder, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. I took a deep breath and turned to Emily, who was still staring into the mirror, a serene expression on her face. I stepped forward, feeling the pull of the darkness surrounding us. I reached out, and as my fingers touched the cold glass, the world around me shattered like fragile ice, and I was pulled back into reality. I found myself standing outside the cafe, the rain still falling, but the weight of the darkness lifted. I looked around, half expecting to see Emily, but she was gone. All that remained was the echo of our encounter, a chilling reminder of how easily we can become lost in our own minds. I walked away, the night seeming less menacing now, but the memory of that mirror lingered, a haunting reflection of the depths I had almost fallen into. I had never been one for online dating, but after a few months of being single, I thought, why not? It was the age of swiping left and right, and everyone seemed to be doing it. So, I set up my Tinder profile, hoping to meet someone interesting. The first few matches were harmless enough, just casual chats and awkward small talk. But then, I matched with someone named Jake. His profile was simple but intriguing. A picture of him hiking in the mountains, a big smile, and a bio that read, "Adventure at heart, looking for someone to share spontaneous road trips and late-night talks." We hit it off immediately. Our conversations flowed like we had known each other for years. He was charming and funny, and he seemed genuinely interested in my life. After a week of chatting, he suggested we meet up for coffee at a local cafe. I hesitated for a moment, feeling that familiar flutter of nerves, but I agreed. It felt like a normal step in this weird world of dating apps. The day of our meeting arrived, and I arrived at the cafe a little early, excited and anxious. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, blending with the sweet scent of pastries. I picked a table near the window, my heart racing as I scanned the crowd for any sign of him. I imagined what he might look like in person, tall and rugged, perhaps just like in his pictures. When he walked in, my heart skipped a beat. Jake was even more handsome than his photos. He wore a dark flannel shirt that accentuated his athletic build, and his eyes sparkled with mischief as he approached me. The initial awkwardness faded quickly, and we talked for hours, losing track of time as we shared stories about our lives, our dreams, and our fears. He had a way of making everything feel intimate, like we were the only two people in the world. After coffee, he suggested we take a walk through the nearby park. It was a stunning autumn day, and the leaves were a tapestry of reds and yellows. We strolled along the winding paths, laughing and joking as we talked about everything from our favorite movies to our childhood memories. But as we ventured deeper into the park, I started to feel an odd shift in the atmosphere. The laughter faded into the background, replaced by a strange tension that hung in the air. Jake mentioned something about the park being a great place for night walks, and I chuckled, but something felt off. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ground. I didn't want to seem rude, but I suggested we head back. He smiled, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes that made me uneasy. Was it disappointment or something darker? We walked back toward the cafe, but instead of taking the shortest route, Jake led me down a less traveled path. The trees closed in around us, their branches stretching like skeletal fingers. I felt a chill run down my spine as the fading light transformed the friendly park into an eerie maze. My instinct screamed that I should turn back, but I didn't want to offend him. After all, we were having such a great time, right? That's when he stopped and turned to face me, his expression suddenly serious. He said he wanted to show me something special, something that not many people knew about. My heart raced as he gestured for me to follow him deeper into the woods. Against my better judgment, I nodded and trailed behind him, curiosity mingling with trepidation. As we ventured further, the path became overgrown, and the sounds of the city faded away, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Just when I thought I might turn back, we arrived at a small, hidden clearing. In the center stood an abandoned gazebo, its wooden frame weathered and covered in moss. Jake walked ahead and began to explore the gazebo, his voice echoing in the stillness as he described how people used to gather there for picnics and celebrations. I stood back, feeling increasingly uneasy. The air felt thick and oppressive, and the shadows cast by the trees seemed to close in on me. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to come off as scared or rude. As I stepped into the gazebo, I noticed strange markings carved into the wooden beams. They looked like symbols, some of which seemed familiar but twisted. Jake was talking animatedly about the history of the place, but I barely heard him. I was too busy scanning the area, my instincts screaming that something was very wrong. Suddenly, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned, and my blood ran cold. A figure was standing just beyond the tree line, watching us. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure was cloaked in darkness, blending into the shadows, but I could feel its gaze locked onto me. Panic surged through me, and I stepped back, almost stumbling as I bumped into Jake. He turned to me, a strange smile on his face that sent a chill down my spine. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, but his tone was off, almost mocking. I forced a laugh, trying to play it cool, but I could feel the tension crackling in the air. I glanced back toward the figure, and it was gone. I was sure I hadn't imagined it. Something was watching us, and the feeling of being hunted clawed at my insides. My instinct screamed for me to run, but I stayed rooted in place, torn between fear and the desire to trust Jake. Jake stepped closer, his demeanor shifting as he leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He began to weave a story about the park, the gazebo, and how it was rumored to be a place where strange rituals took place. My stomach dropped as he spoke, the chill of his words wrapping around me like a noose. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of movement again, and this time it was closer, a shadow darting between the trees. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. I had to get out of there. Just as I took a step back, Jake reached out, gripping my arm with surprising strength. His eyes locked onto mine, the warmth replaced by something dark and wild. In that moment, I realized I hadn't just been on a date. I had been lured into something sinister. His charming persona had cracked, revealing a twisted side that sent my heart racing. I yanked my arm away, adrenaline coursing through my veins, and turned to run. The clearing was a blur as I sprinted down the path, branches snagging at my clothes and skin. I could hear Jake's footsteps behind me, his laughter echoing like a haunting melody. The trees closed in around me, and I stumbled, panic clawing at my throat. I burst through the underbrush and into the nearby street, gasping for breath as I turned to see if he was still coming. But the park was empty behind me, the shadows swallowing the path I had just fled. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment, slamming the door shut and locking it behind me. My heart raced as I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. The chilling realization washed over me. I had escaped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Jake had planned something far more sinister than a simple date. I felt sick to my stomach, wondering what could have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to forget the encounter. I deleted my Tinder profile and swore off dating apps for good, but the memory lingered like a dark shadow, creeping into my thoughts when I least expected it. I'd occasionally replay the moment in the gazebo, the fear, the laughter, the lurking figure that I had seen. Then one night, scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon an article titled, "Missing Persons in the Area." My blood ran cold as I saw his face staring back at me, Jake. The article described how he had gone missing after a series of dates with different women, all of whom had vanished without a trace. My heart raced as I realized I was just another name on a growing list. And as I sat there, the weight of my decision pressed down on me. I heard a soft knock at my door. My breath caught in my throat as I froze, memories flashing through my mind. The knocking continued, rhythmic and persistent. I felt my heart pound as I glanced at the door, dread creeping into my thoughts. But then, a twisted smile crept onto my face. I hadn't told anyone about my date with Jake. No one knew where I had been that day. The knock grew louder, more frantic. I took a step back, my heart racing, and then I heard a familiar voice call out my name from the other side. "Hey, it's me. Let me in." The irony hit me hard. I had escaped, but now I was face to face with the very thing I had feared. The voice outside was unmistakably Jake's, and the door felt like a fragile barrier between my past and an uncertain future.